Order. Welcome to the August 29th, 2024 Planning Commission hearing. Ms. Johnson, can we have a roll call vote?
Thank you, Chair Bauke. I'll take roll call. Chair Bauke.
Here.
Vice Chair Wardlow is absent. Commissioner Barnwell.
Here.
Commissioner Boss.
Present.
Commissioner DeLucia.
Here.
Commissioner Lodge.
Here.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
All right, next is preliminary matters. First is requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or additions of ex-agenda items. Ms. Arcanega, do we have any of those?
Chair Bauke, we do not.
Okay, moving on, we have announcements and appeals. Do we have any of those?
Chair Bauke, we do have one announcement. The 101 Garden Street Hotel will be continuing on to City Council on appeal on October 1st. Commissioner Lodge and Commissioner DeLucia will be in attendance as the PC representatives.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, next is review, considerations, and actions of draft Planning Commission minutes and resolutions. We have the August 8th Planning Commission minutes before the commission. Do I have any comments or corrections from my fellow commissioners?
I'll make a motion to move those minutes.
Okay, we have a motion. Can I have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call vote?
Thank you, Chair Bauke. I'll take roll call vote. Commissioner Boss.
Yes.
Commissioner DeLucia.
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge.
Yes.
Commissioner Barnwell.
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Yes.
Chair Bauke.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on is public comments pertaining to items not on this agenda. Do we have any speaker slips for general public comments or folks online?
Thank you, Chair Bauke. At this time, I haven't received any speaker slips. If you do wish to speak on general public comment, you can fill out a speaker slip at the back of the room. I'm not seeing any movement, so I'll go ahead and move to virtual public comment. If you wish to speak on Zoom at this time, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. I'm not seeing any hands raised, but we did receive written correspondence from Derek Booth that was distributed to the commission prior to the hearing. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Bauke.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to our agenda, we have a continued item, continued from the August 8th meeting, which is the Objective Design and Development Standards. The purpose of the commission's meeting is to have a hearing and bring recommendations to the city council on the objective design standards and a whole lot of municipal code amendments that go with that, and to affirm the categorical exemption under section 15305, minor alterations to land use limitations. With that, we're going to move to a staff presentation. We have project planner Rosie Deisty to make a presentation, unless Mr. Gullett would like to go first. Would you like to go first?
I would. Thank you, Chair Bauke. And I just want to address a letter that we got this morning. It's from our local chapter of AIA, summarizing a survey that they did on odds last week with 31 local licensed architects. And just noting, AIA is an important partner with the city and the community, especially on this effort. These are our local architects who we most want to design buildings in the city. They do great work, and we see it all throughout our city. AIA members have been providing invaluable feedback and support throughout this process, and we expect that to continue as we continue our dialogue with them. Just to be clear, objective standards are a requirement of the state. We're not doing this on our own volition, and they inherently replace flexibility with certainty. That is the point of the odds. We think it's critically important to retain our standard process for those who prefer it and need it. And it's also important to have an open dialogue with the design community and adjust all our regulations and standards to achieve our housing goals and other community planning goals as a matter of good practice. And I just want to touch on a few of the concerns that were raised in this letter. One was that the odds reduce development potential. The same density should be achievable with odds as are allowed in the current process. We're also amending the code to change how rounding is done, so there's the potential of an additional unit for every project moving forward. There was a concern that odds limits architectural creativity, innovation, and flexibility. The odds does this inherently, and the goal is to achieve community architectural quality in this objective way. There's a concern that it will lead to mediocre design. Odds aims for at least better than bad design. Showcase buildings should be in the standard process. Jeff Shelton's design should be in the standard process, and others that deviate from odds. And concern that it's overly complex and restrictive will negatively affect design quality and diversity and will not streamline. Those are all goals of odds. These are things that we want to happen. We may need to adjust them. We expect that we will adjust them, and we'll be seeking specific feedback from our design community moving forward. And that concludes my comments, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Deisty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gullett.
All right, good afternoon, Chair Bauke and members of the commission. I'm here today to review our staff's responses to your motion on the objective design and development standards made on August 8th, 2024, and again, ask for your recommendation to City Council on the Title 25 Objective Design and Development Standards and the Title 30 Zoning Ordinance Amendments. So I'm just going to go through your motion one by one and describe how we responded to those motions. In summary, they referred to text changes to Title 25. There was motion for revisions to the architectural styles map. Some of them led to changes in the Title 30 amendments, and there was a motion regarding a follow-up status report. So on the first one, it was to do with definitions, and there was a request to move specialized architectural definitions into Title 25. So we did add Chapter 2508 and move those specialized terms out of Title 30 and into Title 25. When you go to Title 25, there is a reference. If you need other definitions, you go over back to Title 30 for those. Again, back to Title 25 or the odds, there was a request to spell out the odds zones in one of the tables. Those were in Chapter 2501, the introduction, and we found there were actually 3 tables that needed to spell out the odds zones, so we made that change. There was a request to clarify state density bonus and if and how it would apply to projects using Title 25. So we took a look and found we didn't feel there was any more edits needed because it's already stated twice. The first reference says basically that waivers, concessions, and incentives granted per state density bonus are allowed. And then the second reference talks about how odds projects can exceed general plan maximum density by using state or city density bonus. So we felt it was already pretty clear. Another request was to amend the dimensions for plazas. And this is in reference to the large sites and community open space, which is required for sites of 2 or more acres. The plaza dimensions were previously just stated as 50 by 50 minimum. So we took a look, measured some plazas in the city and had a thought about it, and now decided the minimum dimension could be 30 feet by 30 feet and a minimum area of 2,500 square feet. And to meet that minimum area, it'll probably result in sort of rectangular shaped plazas, which is typically what you'd want to see. Another motion was to further restrict where the contemporary style group would be allowed, and it was asked to remove it from the west side and east side neighborhoods. So this map shows how it was revised. So the areas that were circled were previously allowing all style groups and colored in blue, and we've changed the map to change those areas into green, which restricts it to Mediterranean and craftsman style groups. Another request was back now to Title 30 and to tighten the top of bank definition. This is in reference to measuring creek top of bank. It's section 3015.040 in Title 30. I just want to remind you that the day we came last time on August 8th, we had an addendum to your staff report, and we already added new graphics and definitions for this top of bank definition to Title 30. And what's in here uses the same methodology as the coastal land use plan, which has been appreciated, having this objective method for measuring top of bank. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that this is a stopgap measure while the Creeks Division is working on citywide top of bank and creek buffer standards for Title 22. That's happening somewhat concurrently as we're going through this process. So we wanted to have this objective top of bank definition in place in the case a project is being proposed next to Mission Creek, which has objective buffer standards. Once the Title 22 creek buffers and top of bank definition are adopted, then this would be replaced with that. And that process will have public outreach, it'll have hearings. I think that's the opportunity. If the top of bank definition needs to be further tightened, that would be the opportunity to do it. Back to Title 25, we were asked to prioritize affordable housing. So I just want to clarify that the odds is really just focused on design, but projects using this will still need to include affordable housing if they're eligible under our own inclusionary policies or if state law has an affordability component. We do have a program in the housing element, though, that is directing us to prioritize deed-restricted affordable housing, and work on that program is forthcoming. I did want to point out, though, I just found this out today, that our Accelerate program has been modified, and it is now going to accelerate 100% affordable housing projects citywide. So that's one little effort towards that housing element program that is happening now. Back to Title 25, and this was to do with courtyards and allowing interior courtyards. So this comment came up last time we met, and it was actually great direction from a member of the AIA who pointed out that they interpreted the odds that interior courtyards would not be allowed. And so what we did is took a look again at how courtyards are defined and used in this document, and they're sort of talked about in two different ways. There's medium and large courtyard building types, and then there's a massing type that's a courtyard, and those are described as letters O, U, and L courtyards. So we, after looking at it again, felt that it was best to clarify that the massing types can be oriented in any direction. So even though they showed a primary front and the courtyard towards the front, an L courtyard could be flipped, and then thus allowing an interior courtyard. And the picture here on the right shows another building type called the side court building type, and that shows the courtyards on the side. So there's nothing now that requires the courtyard to be oriented to the front. Back to Title 30, we were asked to retain some language that was in there previously about a 90-year affordable housing covenant. This came up in Section 3175050, which is the parking exceptions and reductions. So we removed what was stricken through to confirm affordability is required for a minimum of 90 years unless otherwise stipulated. And that was put in there because there's state laws that have a shorter minimum affordability period that might apply. We were asked to conduct additional outreach to developers. So we had a pretty short time frame to do this, but I did contact a number of developers, and we heard from 5 of them that were happy and willing to meet with us. So we held those meetings and talked to them, gave them an overview of the Title 25 and the different objective design review versus subjective design review processes. Most of them were really not that familiar with Title 25, but they were happy to hear about it. And in general, the takeaways were that they appreciated that this could offer some predictability and reduced risk, because risk comes from uncertainty in the design review process. They were hoping it would result in a streamlined review process. And we did hear again that affordable housing should receive priority processing. So those were sort of the general takeaways. They seemed excited to have an opportunity to use it once it's adopted. I think this is the last motion. This was to do with a status report, and we were asked to report back to your commission. At the time of the motion, it was left blank how many years or after how many projects. So we would like to come back to you in 2 years after adoption or after 10 projects are approved with that status report. In the meantime, we'll be looking at ways we can collect comments from applicants and staff as this document is being used, so we can respond and collect and respond to maybe some roadblocks people are finding or some standards that are not as clear as they could be, and make adjustments as we need to. Then I wanted to go over a couple of additional edits. These were things that staff is recommending as we went through and made these edits related to the motion. There were a few other items we felt needed some editing. So in Title 30, we made some minor clarifications. These were spoken about on August 8th, but not part of the motion. So we went ahead and made those minor clarifications. And we also noticed there were some definitions that weren't being used in Title 25 or Title 30, so we are recommending deleting those. And then We made some minor clarifications also in Title 25 to make sure we changed the reference to the new definitions chapter, and also to clarify what was meant by most restrictive. Should a parcel be annexed into the city, and if it was not zoned into an odd zone and given an architectural style, we clarified what needs to happen in that case. Finally, as we made the changes to the architectural styles map, when your motion talked about the west side, that was a little undefined. There's other different neighborhoods towards the west of the city, and we also noticed there's these little pocket areas on the mesa that we hadn't talked about, and we thought it would be worth having a conversation with you today just to clarify, do you want to keep it as is or make changes to these 4 areas? So I'm going to go through them one by one and ask that you take a little straw poll vote as we go through them, and just to let us know how you feel about them. If you do recommend a change, then that would go along with the, when we go to ordinance committee, it would go along as a recommended change from the Planning Commission. So I'll start with area 1. This is Vista del Pueblo. It's a little area just off of Carrillo Street, kind of on Carrillo Hill. Right now it's designated for all 3 styles, and the picture shows what it looks like now. It's a condo development. So I'd like to hear from you if you want to keep it as is. Would you want to change it to Mediterranean and Craftsman, or Mediterranean only? It's sort of an isolated area, so there's not a lot around it to compare it to. But if we could pause at this moment and vote on these, or I could go through all 4 of them and come back to you. I'm not quite sure which you would prefer.
My preference is after we take public comment.
Okay.
We can look back. 'Cause
Great.
I think the public may have something to say on these.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I'll keep going then. Second area we'd like to hear from you about is at the intersection of Cliff and Meigs on the Mesa. It is a commercial area with shopping center, offices, residential, condos, apartment buildings. It's very eclectic right now. It's got newer Mediterranean style. It has that shopping center that's sort of Cape Cod style, mid-century modern apartment buildings. I have another set of photos of what this area looks like. So this will be the second area we'd like to hear from you on. Third area is Santa Fe Lane. Again, it's quite isolated. It's an area of multi-unit zoning, so it qualifies for objective design standards. It's right now in the Mediterranean style, so this is the other one we'd like to hear from you about. And then the fourth area is surrounding Santa Barbara City College off of Cliff Drive, Oceano Avenue, and Barranca, and Weldon Road. It's also quite eclectic. It's got Mediterranean style, it's got mid-century modern apartment buildings, newer modern apartment buildings. There's some more pictures here. And then across the street on Barranca is a single unit zone, and I just took one photo of a sort of representative house in that zone. But these more modern apartment buildings are right across the street. So next, I'll just move on to recommendations. Again, we're asking for an amendment to add Title 25 to the municipal code, amendments to Title 30 pertaining to process and other regulations for objective design and development standards, and to implement zoning ordinance cleanup items. Determine that the Title 25 objective design and development standards and Title 30 amendments are categorically exempt from CEQA. And determine that the odds and the Title 30 amendments are consistent with the general plan. This was in your packet of August 8th, but we found they were consistent with policies that support objective standards, pedestrian-friendly design, and protection of historic resources. And should you be able to make that recommendation to City Council, we have tentatively scheduled a hearing with the Ordinance Committee in October. Moving on to City Council for adoption in December. Again, this is the timeline that was in the housing element to get this project done as well. And then in 2025, the ordinance would become effective. There would be training for staff and applicants and new forms and handouts to help everyone through the process. So with that, thank you, and we'll talk later about the map amendments.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Stacy and Mr. Gullett. We're going to move on to public comment, and we'll do those who have handed in a speaker slip first. And do you have any of those?
Thank you, Chair Balke. At this time, I do have one speaker slip for Fred Sweeney. If you want to make your way up to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sweeney.
Mr. Balke and Commissioners, thank you. I'm speaking as a lone member of the AIA, my own personal opinion. I just want to read briefly a statement. I've been following and contributing to this project for the last several years, as with others in the community. And I certainly appreciate all the work both the consultant and the staff have invested in this effort. And as to this document, I have previously shared with my opinion and observations concerning ODDS, explicit objectives and goals, so I'm not going to repeat myself today. I would like to point out an additional observation, though. Over the years, I've appeared before you with another hat on, that is a member of the Upper East Association Board of Directors, past president, et cetera, still a member of that board. And every time we come to either you or the council, we always make sure that whatever opinion or statement we make is either being made on behalf of the board only or as a result of a survey of a majority of our 250 households in the Upper East. And so we're quite clear about how to represent, or if it's a special committee. So we should just take a moment to clarify that the AIA chapter has over 200 professional members and about 40 allied professional members. So you should just take that into account as you listen to testimony that has either been sent to you or you'll hear today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. I believe we have another.
Yes, thank you, Chair Balke. We have one more speaker slip for Cass Ensberg. If you want to make your way to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Chair excuse me, Chair Balke and Commissioners. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here today. It's a very exciting day. I'm Cass Ensberg. I'm a fellow of the AIA and a member of the AIA and this community for over 35 years. I serve on the Historic Landmarks Commission, and I also was selected to serve on the working group for the ODDS development. I am speaking here today for myself, however, and I am very happy to be here. It's just been an incredible process, and it's pretty exciting to be here today. And I want to offer strong support for the ODDS document as presented today. I have a couple things I wanted to say. I think it's really helpful and important that we remind ourselves of the many, many factors that contribute to our ability to achieve housing, and that ODDS can do only a little bit about that. Some of those factors that we're all, I think, pretty aware of are high land costs, given our coastal, mild, and paradise place we live in, high material and financing costs, and also low income levels. I personally would like to see higher living wage incomes and more opportunities for home ownership. And in the meantime, I am very grateful and thankful to our nonprofit organizations who can receive public funds to subsidize and create affordable housing. I also am very thankful and grateful to our private developers for their contributions, given even more difficult challenges without public money to subsidize development costs and to also provide low-income units. I would also like to say that even without the ODDS, we are making progress, and I think that's important for Sacramento, all of us to remember, and for Sacramento to know. I have seen many projects receive design approval quickly, and now I hope for their success in achieving the permits and the financing to commence construction. I believe the community supports greater density for housing through appropriate, sensitive, compatible design. Small, medium, and large projects all contribute to have a proper place that is balanced and well thought out in this ODDS document. I support the styles map and the limitations for the contemporary style. And the last thing I want to see is large, overscaled buildings that, if insensitively placed, can destroy much of what we all love about our Santa Barbara. With that, I will again urge Planning Commission to move forward and with this draft and recommend that council approve and adopt. And I sincerely thank the staff, all of the staff, our consultant, the work group, the community, and this Planning Commission for your diligent and thoughtful work on these objective design and development standards that meets the requirements of both the state and our local community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this time, I haven't received any further speaker slips, and I'm not seeing any movement, so I'll go ahead and move to virtual public comment. I do see one hand raised for Ellen Bildstein, so I'm going to go ahead and give you permission to speak, and you'll just have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Ellen Biltston, an architect in town, active with the AIA group, and but speaking today on behalf of my own opinions about things regarding the ODDS. Just seeing the recent items that were shown regarding changes to the style map for where architectural styles are allowed to move forward for projects that adopt ODDS. I'd like to just offer the thought that we have quite clear maps already regarding El Pueblo Viejo and historic zones within our city that allow for the appropriate styles in those areas. The ODDS architectural styles map, in my opinion, is not a needed additional item to be included with ODDS. We have the objective design standards defined for the 3 styles, and we have those styles located throughout the city already. And there are areas of town that are already have some contemporary and craftsman style buildings that would be out of compliance. And it seems like this is just another piece of constraint on allowing housing projects to move forward that isn't necessary. So just would like to express appreciation for all the efforts made so far and the sensitivity to the needs of our community. Anything that we can do to facilitate affordable housing, which presumably ODDS projects would be pursuing that avenue more so than projects that might go the other route where they're open to more design review process, are the ones that we don't want to constrain, in my view, in any way beyond what's necessary. And I think the development standards run the risk of heading us in a direction where ODDS is going to be less desirable to pursue as an avenue for a streamlined housing proposal way of going about the approvals process. Thanks again for all your efforts, and look forward to seeing how this will end up. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I don't see any further hands raised, but we did receive written correspondence from Jan Hockhauser and Amy Fitzgerald Tripp on behalf of AIA Santa Barbara that was distributed to the commission prior to the hearing. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Bauke.
Okay, so I think what we'll want to do at this point is to have any questions from the commission to staff, and then after that, then start on these specific questions you asked us. So Commissioner Wiscombe, followed by Commissioner Voss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you all so much for this. And Mr. Gullett, for your comments at the beginning. I think that's really important. I just had one quick question, Ms. Theisty, and that is, and I think I didn't have time to look it up before Chair Bauke called on me, for the coming back to PC, 2 years or 10 projects. It's whichever is first. Is that correct?
Chair Bauke and Commissioner Wiscom, yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
Thank you, and that's my only question. How's that go? Pretty good, huh?
Very good. Commissioner Boss, followed by Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Chair. First, just thank you so much for bringing this back so quickly. You had a lot of big tasks in the past couple of weeks. I had a question about prioritizing affordable housing. So between number 7 and number 10, which was meet with Housing Authority and other developers, some of the feedback they gave was affordable housing projects should receive priority processing. But I understand from the presentation today that Accelerate 2.0 will do that beyond ODDS?
Chair Bauke and Commissioner Boss, yes, I believe that's, again, a new added to Accelerate 2.0, I think it's called, where they're working to prioritize in the building permit process and planning review 100% affordable projects. So that should, that's what the Housing Authority was hoping to hear. And so we've been able to do that now.
So they're satisfied with that change?
Well, they may not even know about that change. It just happened, but I assume they would be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question about the 90-year existence of deed restricted. There's also, does that include the rollover that is currently in place?
Chair Bauke and Commissioner Lodge, I don't know the answer. I don't know if Mr. Gullett does or Ms. Ostringer.
Commissioner Lodge, through the chair, I'm not sure I quite understand what you mean with the 90-year rollover.
That when it ends, or when property is exchange occupancy and so on, that it then rolls over for another 90 years.
Okay, I understand now, thank you. Yes, so that the same policies and procedures would remain in place. And that's
Okay.
what our housing policies and procedures require.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Lodge. Any other questions? Okay, so let's go into your questions on those specific areas, and then we'll have deliberation on the whole package.
Chair Bauke?
Yes.
If I could make a recommendation, Commissioner Boss informed me that she happens to live in one of the small pocket areas that you'll be discussing. I haven't had a chance to review it because I just learned about it, but I would recommend that you take that matter first, discuss it, and Ms. Boss can recuse herself during the discussion, step outside, and then we'll bring her back, and then we can go through the rest.
Okay, which area, you're at number 3, so we'll take
Ms.
number
Boss will need to identify which area that is.
Sorry, Area 3 on Santa Fe Lane.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take 3 first, and then go back to 1, but I'll let you skedaddle out of here.
And Chair Bauke, can I just clarify for the commission? Again, odds only applies to new construction. So it would be the unlikely event that this development was completely redeveloped. Then a style choice would need to be made.
Commissioner Wiscom, I think, has a question, so why don't we go with that?
No, I was just going to start,
Okay.
just say
Okay,
what I
so we're
think.
gonna- okay.
I mean, since I live on the Mesa, and these areas are all on the Mesa, I'm familiar with all of them. The Santa Fe right now, that development that you're seeing in those pictures is, I believe, about less than 15 years old. It's not very old. So I guess I would, and it's unlikely that we're going to see anything else up there, but I would support Mediterranean in that area. I think that's what I wrote. Hold on, let me just check here. Yeah, only Mediterranean in that area. Thank you.
Commissioner Lodge?
I would agree, because it is all Mediterranean now, and it's fully developed, that street is, and it just wouldn't be appropriate to have something else in that area.
Mr. Barnwell?
I concur with Ms. Wiscom.
Commissioner DeLuccio, do you have a comment?
No, I concur also. It's currently Mediterranean. I agree. That one I agree should just stay Mediterranean.
Okay, and I concur with the rest of the commissioners, so I think that's unanimous, so we can bring Ms. Boss back
Okay, thank you.
and move on to Area 1.
Okay, so we're back to Area 1, Vista del Pueblo. Again, it's fully developed. Probably unlikely it'll be completely redeveloped, but again, we want to have a style assigned in the event that it is.
Commissioner Wiscombe, you can go first.
Thank you. I'm anxious to hear what my fellow commissioners say, but my gut tells me two styles, Mediterranean or Craftsman, in this particular location.
Okay, Commissioner DeLuccio.
Okay, remind me, what's there now? Which styles?
Commissioner DeLuccio, it's in the photo there.
I think the commentary, I can't find my notes, but I think was it all three styles right now? Or just-
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
yes, correct. Right now, it's allowing all three.
Then I think it should, I would recommend that it remain allow going forward three styles.
Okay, Commissioner Lodge.
I would concur with the Mediterranean and Craftsman.
Commissioner Barnwell.
I concur also.
You're just not showing up. Okay, Commissioner Boss.
Sorry, also concur.
Okay, actually, I'm not a big fan of contemporary showing up without design review, but I actually would say all three, because if you look at what's physically there, if you give it a style, it is more contemporary than it is anything. But I will go with the rest of the majority on this one.
Okay, so it sounds like this area, number one, you would recommend Mediterranean and Craftsman. Change it from blue to green.
Correct.
Okay, or the majority recommends that, yeah. Okay, the next area, number two, again, it's currently designated for all three styles. It could stay that way or change to Mediterranean Craftsman or Mediterranean only.
Okay, Commissioner Lodge, hit the button first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I drove around the neighborhood via Street View, Maps Google Street View, and I was really surprised by how much of it, of the commercial area, like from Lazy Acres to Albertsons, all of that is very much Mediterranean. And then there's the sort of the Craftsman that's in the example on the screen. I guess that's mostly Craftsman. I would like to see it green, Mediterranean and Craftsman.
Okay, Commissioner Wiscombe.
Yeah, the pictures can sway you, but I really feel pretty strongly, this is a really busy, important area, and I feel that this should really represent kind of the Santa Barbara style. I'd be for any new development, only Mediterranean.
Okay, Commissioner Barnwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think this place needs an architecture that defines the space. I know the people on the Mesa are very proud to live there, and right now, to me, it looks a little hodgepodgey, and I agree with Commissioner Lodge. There are several examples of the Mediterranean style, not including which a big one, the old ice skating rink, and this one on the corner. So my vote would be in favor of continuing the Mediterranean style. Thank you.
Okay, next, Commissioner Boss.
For this section, I'd prefer Mediterranean and Craftsman.
Okay, and Sheila, you were up on the screen one more time.
Well, seeing that there's support for just Mediterranean, I'll go along with that.
Okay, DeLuccio, have you got a?
I'm just going to go to all three here, too. I think we're putting more, I thought at the last meeting we decided what we were going to do with, how we were going to do this, and I was ready to move it forward last time. Plus, I think we're putting more restraints on on allowing the odds by limiting the number of different styles you can have. So for this, I'm going to go with all three. I know I'm in the minority.
We have no straight consensus. I'm leaning between just straight Mediterranean and Mediterranean and Craftsman. So what's your count and what's the majority in this case?
Chair Balke, I have 1 for all 3 styles, 2 for Mediterranean Craftsman, and 3 for Mediterranean.
Okay, so let's just go.
We need a fourth vote, and I'll vote your way just to give you a majority, being that I'm in the minority, okay?
Okay.
Because you need 4 in order to make it happen. Wouldn't 3 and 3 make it, not pass it? Yeah,
That's
It's-
technically correct.
It's a straw vote poll, but yeah, it would confuse the
I'm going to
matter.
go your way on this, okay?
So you have direction now?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, final one is Area 4 near City College. Same thing, it's currently designated for all 3, but we could change that should you want to.
Okay, Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this area needs to remain flexible. We need more student housing. It's pretty much eclectic there now, and I think for anyone that's going to use these guidelines to develop, I think they should have the flexibility in this area since it's probably going to be for student housing. So I would go with all 3 styles.
Okay, Commissioner Boss.
I agree with all 3 styles.
Commissioner DeLucia, followed by Commissioner Barnwell.
What if I differ here? I actually am going to go with all 3 styles.
Commissioner Barnwell.
What a rebel. I concur, if for no other reason than if we put in some of student housing there, I think the less expensive design standards, I think, would benefit the housing for the students. So I would leave it wide open, all the styles. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually, my comments were pretty similar to Commissioner Barnwell's. Knowing the area and knowing that contemporary is the cheapest to build, it's most likely that if anybody wanted to redevelop this area into student housing or anything for affordable housing, it would be in a contemporary mode. At least that would be their first choice. So I will support all 3 in this area. All right, so we have, I believe, consensus on that. So
Thank you.
We've done our duty on your little quiz here. Okay, so moving on, we have, you want to put up the slides on the recommendation? Okay. So who would like to make a motion on this so we can start discussions? Or does somebody have something to say beforehand? Did you push a button? Because
yes.
I got nothing. But
Yeah,
sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So Commissioner Barnwell, I think.
I would move all the recommendations.
Okay.
Do you want me to delineate them, or is that
No,
necessary?
please not.
Mr. Chair? Yeah, I think last time we saw this, I actually went through this, and it was part of the motion, but I don't know, maybe we eliminated it because we had some additions to the motion, but I remember reading this, so it's fine if we redo this again. Is that what you prefer at this point?
Ms. Dicey, do you?
Chair Balke and Commissioner Wiscombe, Ms. Ostringer, could you advise? I'm not quite sure.
Chair
the
Balke,
best way.
Commissioner Wiscombe, yeah, I think because we'd made the changes, we'd like you, and you've now seen the
To
revisions to
reiterate?
25 and 30,
Okay.
that, yes, to
Okay.
reiterate that with
Okay.
those changes, we're recommending that council.
Okay, then I'll second Commissioner Barnwell's motion if it hasn't been seconded.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? We'll start with Commissioner Barnwell.
I have no comments. I'm
Okay.
behind the whole thing.
Commissioner Wiscombe, comments on the motion?
I just, Yeah, I just want to thank staff for putting this together and doing such a great job in a very short amount of time. And I also wanted to comment on Mr. Sweeney's comments and on the letter we got from AIA. I think part of the comments on the letter, Mr. Gullett just really went through it very well, but a lot of the comments were almost, this is a state law, so we're following state law. And we do have the regular design process, design review process in place too. So I think our professionals have a choice there. But Mr. Sweeney made a comment about how many AIA Santa Barbara members there are, and he said 200, and then when you have the, I don't know if you call them affiliates or associates, but another 40. So this letter that we got represented, basically, if you use the 240 figure, there were 31 respondents to this that took the survey in this letter, and that's what it was all about. So that's 13% of the AIA Santa Barbara plus associates, and it's 15.5% if you just take the architects here that are members of AIA in Santa Barbara. So I think that's important to look at. Although the letter was impactful in some ways and had a lot of great suggestions, this has been a long process, and I think the committee has done an exceptional job, and staff has done an exceptional job getting this together. So I think we have to look at that way and look at that. This letter represents a very small amount of people of our design professionals that responded to this. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you again to staff.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner DeLucio, your name's on the list.
Yeah. Actually, I echo your comments. However, I was a little concerned when I did receive the letter and the survey, and there are a lot of comments there that would make you think. And but I do think highly of Mrs. Sweeney, and Ms. Insberg is here also, and so I did speak offline on the record to Ms. Insberg this morning, and Mrs. Sweeney came out. So, and your comments, Mr. Gullett, really, I'm so glad you made them in the beginning of the meeting, and you put them in perspective. We realize that when we implement this, there will be some challenges, and we also discussed that we are going to bring it back in a couple of years to refine it after we give it an opportunity to be implemented, and we have some experience with it. So, and I was actually ready to move this in the last meeting, and I'm definitely ready to move this along to council in this meeting. So thank you very much.
And
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification for your motion. It should include the results of the straw poll that'll go forward to City
So
Council.
moved.
Okay.
So seconded.
Okay, we fixed that. Okay, Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to make some comments about the architects, the letter from the architects that did respond. They were given only 4 or 5 days, I think, to respond. I think there might have been a bigger, if they'd started with this process earlier, there might have been a bigger one, and it was a long document to go through to see what was in it and how it would affect them. I'll be voting to concur with the I'll be voting for the motion, but with reluctance. This is an example of floor area ratio, zoning, design controls, whatever. And in April of 2021, Stefanos Polyzoides, one of the fathers of the new urbanism, was part of a series in Santa Barbara presentations on Santa Barbara yesterday, today, tomorrow. And he said, among other things, that he'd visited Santa Barbara over 300 times during the 50 years he'd lived in Pasadena. Santa Barbara's a city of such remarkable architecture and urbanism that I have constantly felt charged and recharged by coming and observing, as going to faraway places in Europe and Asia or South America or anywhere else one goes, to find a place that is so rich in precedent and in presence, that one returns a different kind of person. He went on to say that refer to the magnificent fabric of the city, how really extraordinary it is, how mixed and varied it is. Because it looks unusual and is unusual because it has old and new buildings, and it has big buildings and small buildings, and sort of the key part of it to me, and the buildings talk to each other. And in a separate correspondence with me, he said, buildings with FARs, buildings are born lumpy by taking advantage of the maximum amount of allowable massing for a given site. And page 43 of the current version of odds, page 43, the illustration there shows that. They've got boxes. And they're all, they go as far as is allowed in cubic footage. So I think it's unfortunate, but this is thank you, Sacramento, I guess. What's the opposite of thank you? No thank you, I guess.
Okay, Commissioner Barnwell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We mentioned this at our last meeting, and I would like to be sure that it becomes institutionalized. We had suggested that a bona fide record be kept of the projects that come before us and what those items are that we think are pertinent and how they pertain to this. And I believe that satisfies my concern with regard to the architects and others who have some issues with this. We try it out, but I want to be sure that it's more than just a casual over coffee with the staff, which means kind of setting up a checklist, or I don't know exactly how you do that, but, and I'm in favor of everything. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Lodge, you put your light back on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was one other comment that staff didn't make about the AIA survey. And of those who did respond, 55% prefer the existing discretionary review process.
Okay, thank you.
So I thought
Commissioner
was
Voss, followed
interesting.
by Commissioner DeLucia.
Thank you, Chair. I think just a request in number 11, I know you'll come back with the status report, but I don't think it was explicitly spelled out here. Any developer who chose to not go through ODDS, if we could have record of that included and why. So maybe it was faster to go through Accelerate 2.0 or something else. But it would be good to know why developers chose to go through it or not.
Okay, Commissioner DeLucia.
I just want to comment, and maybe it's a question for staff. You know, we're going round and around about this. This is mandatory, right? This odds is a requirement from the state that we comply, right? With
Chair Bucky and Commissioner DeLucia, yes, we do need objective standards for projects that come in.
And is the state going to monitor us on this, on the document in any way?
Not that I'm aware of. It was funded by a state grant, and we will be reporting to the state that we finished the project, and they will see the final effort because they funded it.
And about having specific architectural types in there, is on a checklist which we're able to do in this, you know, that won't raise any red flag or anything?
Chair Bucky and Commissioner DeLucia, I haven't heard any, there's no guidance from the state exactly what you can do with your objective standards. As long as they're objective, that's what they care about.
Okay,
So if we have style restrictions or style allowances, I don't think it's a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, everybody's put in their 2 cents. I will be supporting the motion. I do have some reluctance and there was quite a discussion at the work group, and I was the Planning Commission representative at the work group about contemporary. My concern is having contemporary just show up in certain neighborhoods without any kind of public process. Is there sort of an aberration? It will be the developer's first choice because of the cost factors involved in contemporary versus the other stylistic choices that they will have before them on the odds. So I'm somewhat reluctant that we still have contemporary in lots of areas except for Upper State Street and Lacumba Plaza and around there. That I will support the motion and recommend it to the council. Personally, I have concerns about the contemporary / industrial on the east, basically to the west of Garden Street. I'm not quite sure how well that's going to fit with the historic nature of the architecture in the LPO district. It's going to be sort of a jump in contrast. I know there is a project at the 200 block of Haley that has been permitted. I'm surprised I didn't get more public outcry, honestly. When I saw it, I was going, does this fit? But I will support the motion. I hope maybe the council may revisit it a little bit and be more restrictive on the contemporary allowance under the odds, in my opinion. But I think the consensus of the commission is what we have before us. So with that, I'll ask for the motion to be called, and let's have a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair Bauke. I'll take roll call vote. Commissioner DeLucia?
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge?
Yes.
Commissioner Barnwell?
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe?
Yes.
Commissioner Boss?
Yes.
Chair Bauke?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on to our next item, which is a new item, which is the airport master plan update. I'm going to give you a minute to get yourself settled. I think there's a change of guard going on. Yeah, sure. All right. Are we ready to go? So Megan, are you going to introduce this? I wasn't sure, or do we jump straight to the folks at the airport? So I'll turn it over to Sarah. Now, I'm going to pronounce her name wrong. Is it Iz or Oz?
So Sarah Isa is in the front row here, but
Okay.
Chris Hastert with the
Chris, you're going to be the one to say.
with the airport department, and I'll do the transition with the names. But
It was unclear, so we'll have you start off with your presentation, and then we'll go to public comments and then discussion. So please begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Balke and commission members. Chris Hastert, the department head for the airport, and with me here, I have some excellent help from our staff, so I'm going to turn it over to Jessica Metzger, our airport planner, and then I'll be available to answer any questions along with our consultant as well.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Director, and good afternoon, Chair Balke and Commissioners. While we're getting our PowerPoint pulled up, I'll just start by saying that we started this process in June of 2022. And through those years, we have held over 20 meetings, including the formation of a technical advisory committee and a community advisory committee. Okay, it should be good, Ms. Johnson, thank you. And we also have presented updates along the way to this commission, to our airport commission, and to City Council, as well as talk to the City of Goleta City Council also. This slide lays out our team, which Chris alluded to, our director, Mr. Hastert, and then behind me, Sarah Isa. I'm Jessica Metzger. We also have Brad Klinsing and Tiana Herrera on the team. And then for our consultant team, we have Corbett Smith sitting to my right. He's our project manager. And then Hardy Bullock right behind me is the deputy project manager. And then not here, but in person somewhere else watching is Brian Moore, our national planning practice lead. And with that, I'll to Corbett to finish the presentation.
Thank you, Jessica. As Jessica mentioned, my name is Corbett Smith. I am Mead & Hunt's project manager for the Airport Master Plan update. On your screen is a brief agenda of the items that we'll talk about today. Some of the items will be a recap of prior topics discussed, as well as some new content. So we'll briefly touch on what a master plan is, the timeline of the project, and where we are now. We'll recap what the preferred development concept is. We'll talk about the airport layout plan, exactly what that is and the function. We'll recap what the airport noise contours look like. And then we'll talk about the projects to come out of the master plan, the capital costs and funding options that the airport has for those. And we'll close with next steps of the master plan. So just a recap of what a master plan is. I won't go through this whole slide again, but it's essentially a planning document that outlines a long-term vision for the airport. It's not engineering level, very conceptual, a reservation of space. Through the plan, we identify 20-year forecasts of activity for both number of airplanes landing and taking off and passengers traveling through the terminal. So we identify needs that the airport would need to provide in order to meet those 20-year forecasts. And as just a reminder, we did bring forward the guiding principles in the prior airport master plan and incorporated them throughout this master plan update. So on the screen is a timeline of the entire airport master plan update project. All of the blue boxes are the major deliverables or milestones. There were narrative chapter deliverables that accompanied the majority of those. We started with an inventory of everything on the airport. We then conducted an environmental overview that helped identify the constraints on the airport. Then we developed those aviation forecasts that I mentioned that look out 20 years into the future. Those forecasts were approved by the FAA for use in this airport master plan. We then conducted a facility requirements exercise where we compared that 20-year forecast to what exists today and identified areas that might need improvements. And then we did a series of alternatives for those specific improvements, identifying various ways of accomplishing it. We conducted the land use planning exercise, which is essentially where the noise contours were developed. A financial feasibility component, which we'll talk a bit about today. The airport has the draft financial feasibility chapter in review now, and it should be on the airport's website within a few weeks. And finally, we have a draft of the airport layout plan. That's where we are. This will be the final meeting of this part of the master plan with the Planning Commission. There will be a follow-on comprehensive environmental review that the airport will undertake. It's essentially all related to the same project, just contractually different contracts. As a reminder, Jessica touched on it briefly, but we did have a significant public outreach and input committee process throughout this master plan. The community input committee and the technical input committee we met with 4 times. Those milestones are shown on this schedule, as well as 3 different open houses. We conducted our last open house last week, and it was well attended. So on this slide, we have a simplified view of the preferred development concept. And this really shows everything planning to be accommodated in the next 20 years. It's important that we understand there's really 2 different types of projects. Projects that are associated with compliance, that is FAA standards and how the airport will achieve or maintain those standards compliance. And the other category of projects are those designed to anticipate the 20-year demand that was developed initially in the master plan. So demand-driven projects are things like general aviation hangars, fuel farm improvements, which we heard in the Airport Commission question about what types of fuel could be accommodated in that fuel farm expansion? The answer is a variety. There's a lot of interest these days in sustainable aviation fuels, unleaded avgas for general aviation aircraft. Both of those could be accommodated in this fuel farm expansion. The airport layout plan does not designate the type of fuel to go into the tank, only that there is area sufficient for a fuel expansion project. So I mentioned the standards compliance projects. Those are all primarily related to taxiway geometry. There's been a number of changes in FAA standards over time as to where taxiways should be, what their design should look like, all to avoid accidental runway incursions. Other projects to accommodate the 20-year demand, a future parking garage, a very long-term outside of the 20-year planning period terminal expansion. And if you recall from some of our prior meetings, we looked at a scenario beyond the 20-year forecast at passenger enplanements and wanted to make sure that we were providing a very comprehensive view and plan for the airport. So we looked at a number outside that 20-year planning period and identified what the terminal would need to look like should demand continue growing at an extraordinary rate into the future. So the airport layout plan. This is the document that the airport prepares and the FAA ultimately approves that details everything on the airport that exists today as well as everything planned for the next 20 years. It's got a lot of information about FAA standards, setbacks, requirements, different surfaces. This is one of 20 sheets of the set. I think about 10 of them detail the airspace surfaces off of each of the runway ends and the obstructions that might be nearby, below, or above those surfaces. The airport has a draft set of this plan now. We're reviewing it together, going through any last modifications, and then that will be submitted to the FAA for their official approval. So just to recap on the noise contours, we talked about this previously, but they have changed over time. If you look at that on the left side of your screen, the black outermost boundary, those were the noise contours for the base year of the prior airport master plan. And the dark blue innermost contour is the base year of this master plan update. The dashed green line is the 20-year projected noise contour associated with this master plan update. So they have changed. Really, there's two primary reasons for that. Number one is the total number of operations has changed. The base year of the prior master plan assumed a higher number of operations than the base year of this master plan. And in conjunction with that is a change in the fleet that is using the airport. The airlines previously were flying much smaller in seat capacity aircraft, where they've changed their changed the direction of how they operate into this airport with larger seat capacity aircraft that are newer and quieter in general. A couple other points to point out here on the noise contours. You'll notice to the south near the shoreline, there is a shift of the blue and the green contours. That is due to the potential ultimate closure of runway 15 left, 33 right. We did discuss this in a prior meeting, but there is not sufficient justification for the FAA to continue funding 3 runways at the Santa Barbara Airport. The airport could operate that runway if they wanted to, but fund it out of their own pocket, and those costs are significant over the next 20 years. Another change in the noise contours is in that northeast quadrant where there's a roundish bulge in that green contour, and that's associated with a future vertiport potentially coming to the airport. So we did include operations in that scenario. And now we'll talk about what all this costs. As I mentioned, there's a significant chapter, the financial feasibility chapter, that will be available for review that goes into a lot more detail about funding options and the cost assumptions. But for simplicity, on the screen today, we have a summary of all those capital projects and an estimate of when they might occur between short-term, mid-term, and long-term. Totals to be about $179 million over the next 20 years. But the good news is that the airport is not on the hook to fund that all themselves. There are a number of grant opportunities that we'll discuss in a moment. A couple of the very large cost items are additional general aviation hangars, and that is due to the cost of steel, and construction in general is extraordinarily expensive these days. And then in the long term, 10 to 20 year period, we have a parking garage at $45 million. I should point out that we did have engineers and professional cost estimators develop these cost estimates. They should be conservative but realistic. They do include everything from design, contractor mobilization, all the way through construction, so they are completely inclusive. So how do we pay for that? And as I said, there are a number of funding options. First and foremost is the FAA's Airport Improvement Program grants, AIP grants. There are two types of those, entitlements and discretionary. Entitlement funds are a collection of monies that the FAA sets aside based on the number of passengers that travel through the airport. The airport can then apply for grants to use those funds for various projects. The discretionary side of that coin is, just as it sounds, it's discretionary. It depends on how much funding the FAA sends to the region, and then airports within the region can compete for that money based on a ranking of projects. For the purposes of the cost estimates that we're presenting today and in the chapter, we assume that none of those are funded by discretionary grants. It's always possible that that can change, but it presents a more conservative scenario if we assume discretionary grants are not used. Then we have passenger facility charges, or PFCs, and those are fees that are added on to the traveler's ticket that fly into and out of the airport. Those are also set aside in a separate pot where the airport can apply to use those monies for associated projects. Then we have the customer facility charges, or CFCs, essentially the same thing, only they're fees that are attached to the cars rented out of the terminal. There's always the airport fund itself, which is funded from other revenue sources that the airport collects. Bonds are always an option, and we'll talk about that as it relates to the parking garage. Parking garages tend to have more limitations on what funds and what grants can be used for that. And then private investment that I mentioned specifically for the general aviation hangar improvements. So this slide just paints a picture of how we project those funding options might be broken down in the future. And I should caveat all of this that this is not set in stone. The airport undertakes its airport capital improvement plan every year with the FAA. The FAA generally likes to see the next 3 to 5 years as fairly certain, but beyond that, the airport has wide latitude to move projects up and down in their priority and their schedule. But as I did mention, private funding being a significant source, mainly because of the cost of those general aviation hangar improvements. If the airport did pursue a partnership with a private entity, that would accommodate about half of that entire $179 million. Then the other next largest piece is a bond or series of bonds that would be associated with the parking garage. As I mentioned, there is limitations on parking garage funding options. So we project that a bond would be used there in conjunction with the customer facility charges, or CFCs, that are collected from the rental car companies, as well as a portion of airport funds. But one of the important takeaways here is really that the airport fund we're estimating to be less than 3% responsible for that total number. So as far as next steps in the master plan update, I mentioned we'll be finalizing the airport layout plan and submitting that to the FAA. There's usually a review and comment period that occurs with the FAA where we might make some minor changes and submit for final approval. The consultant team will revise the narrative chapters, make any last editorial changes, and a consistent date across all of them. And then the airport will begin their comprehensive environmental overview. Now I'll turn it back to Jessica.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So doing a 20-year plan like this is not something that happens in a vacuum by any means. These are some of the other projects that have been happening concurrently that have helped inform our master plan and vice versa. We have our terminal improvement project, and that will probably be coming through the process for environmental review in the next year or two for you to certify. We also have the general aviation redevelopment that Corbett talked about before. Mead and Hunt also worked on our drainage master plan, which was very helpful in looking at what happens most recently with our increased changes of climate and increased rainfall, as well as working with ESA on sea level rise adaptation plans and kind of combining all of those together into this master plan document. For budget and financial information, as we talked about, the FAA distributes most of the money to the airport, covering 90.66% of project costs. And as Mr. Smith said, those costs have been delineated by short-term, midterm, and long-term, but that can change based on a variety of things, including input from community and commissions like yours. And as you know, the region is really the antithesis of Earth Day, and sustainability has always been very important to the city of Santa Barbara. And the airport master plan is in keeping with that, following sustainable design policies and practices, including keeping to our local coastal program, which protects the Goleta Slough and also resources in the airport. And once again, incorporating those sea level rise and climate change data sources into our alternatives. And then we're also looking at examining aircraft electrification. That was that area in the northwest corner or northeast corner of the map. And sustainable aviation fuels could be housed at our new facilities at the fuel farm. And then we also worked with Mead and Hunt as part of the master plan to update our recycling, reuse, and waste reduction plan. And we also would like to thank the Sustainability Department who helped us edit that. So our recommendation is that the Planning Commission receive a status update on the master plan at Santa Barbara Airport, and we look forward to being back in front of you through the CEQA process as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haster and your whole team. Thank you. We're going to next take any public comments. Do we have any sign-up slips? We have one at least, okay, good. So we'll
Good afternoon, members of the Santa Barbara City Planning Commission. My name is Gail Johnson, and I'm a resident of the county of Santa Barbara and live east of the Santa Barbara Airport in a neighborhood called More Mesa Shores, which is off of South Patterson. I've lived in my home with my husband and family for 26 years. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. We were aware of the SBA when we bought our house, and that the More Mesa undeveloped land was and continues to be used as a flight path. Until 5 to 7 years ago, smaller aircraft dominated the type of aircraft using the airport and coming in behind our house. By and large, they didn't create an ongoing noise problem for us, even though there were more flights. I never filed a complaint about the airport. In the last 5 to 7 years, larger aircraft have dominated departures and arrivals at the airport and over our neighborhood. Larger aircraft may result in less air traffic and therefore less noise, but that needs to be put into context. Commercial airlines and private businesses now use larger aircraft, and they create a lot more noise because they are bigger, have bigger mass, and they're flying directly over neighborhoods, and they fly lower, at lower altitudes. And I actually have data here if anybody's interested in looking at that. If this were not true, there would not be the volume of noise complaints that the SBA receives, or the need for a letter from the City of Goleta to the City of Santa Barbara requesting that something be done to address the noise problems. Larger aircraft result in noise that is continuous and disruptive to us and our daily lives. It also affects our property values and that of others to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. So with regard to the master plan update, there must be absolute transparency that shows a potential increase in the number of flights using the SBA over time due to existing and increased capacity and the resultant noise impacts of the surrounding neighborhoods. Regular noise studies are needed. Please also require the implementation of a meaningful noise abatement program as part of the master plan update, with a framework that spells out in detail, in addition, how a program is sustained and funded properly. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, do we have any other speaker slips or folks online?
Thank you, Chair Balke. At this time, I don't have any further speaker slips, and I'm not seeing any movement. We also did not have any virtual participants, and we didn't receive any written correspondence for this item, so I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Balke.
Okay, so that brings us to the commission's question period. So who would like to ask questions of the folks at the airport? See anybody? Oh, Mr. DeLuccio, followed by Commissioner Barnwell, then followed by Commissioner Wiscombe.
Well, thank you. I do have questions. My mic was on by accident, but that's okay. I don't understand. I've been here almost 2 years. I don't know in queue and out queue and all that. But I want to thank you very much, first of all, for everything that you've done with the MPU. And does the MPU actually have a noise abatement program, some commentary on it within the document?
You can take that if you wanted to. So the master plan, Commissioner DeLuccio, thank you for the question. The master plan does evaluate the impact of the preferred alternatives as it relates to noise. And so you will notice on the slide that we showed that those noise contours have actually shrunk a little bit. Just to acknowledge the public speaker's comments, that is a culmination of noise over a period of time, and it is weighted for early morning departures, late night departures are more heavily weighted. But it does not mean necessarily that the noise impact to the community is reducing as far as perception goes. So just acknowledging we do have flights that leave earlier than they had before, and we do have different aircraft utilizing the airport. And some of them, even though they're larger, are quieter as new technology, but it depends on which aircraft are used. So there is a different process to evaluate noise at an airport, and that is outside of the scope of a master plan document. And those are efforts that we are also currently undertaking in a different track right now with the letter that was mentioned from the City of Goleta to the City of Santa Barbara, our response, and the potential for what's called a Part 150 noise study in the near future.
And there's some meetings going on, correct? Is there a committee that's been formed to address that? And is that open to the public so they can perhaps attend?
So thank you, Commissioner DeLuccio. We do have several different items that were addressed by the City of Goleta that they requested us to look at, and it's not limited to that list. We can look at other ideas as well. But a portion of those items, we decided that the best action to take forward would be to form a noise working group. And Ms. Johnson is actually on that working group. Would we appreciate her efforts to try to work with the airport to find some better solutions to, if anything, reduce that noise impact. So that noise working group consists of residents from the different neighborhoods around Goleta, the unincorporated area, and the City of Santa Barbara, as well as airport stakeholders, including corporate pilots, airline representative, blanking on everybody that is on the list, but a wide range of input from operators of aircraft and those that are impacted by the operations of aircraft. And we've only had one meeting so far. There's a lot of information to cover. There's a lot that will hopefully come out of that group. But we're at the very early stages of that group, and I think that you will see some positive impacts towards the noise impact come out of it. Ultimately, there is still an airport, and there will still be scheduled flights on airlines that will impact the community. Our goal is to reduce that impact as much as possible.
So the next question is there's been a lot of growth at the airport, and it's a question, I guess, because the employments, when the master plan was done back in 2012, the projection was 657,000 by 2032, and by 2026, the projection is to exceed that number. Can you maybe explain how that happened?
Thank you, Commissioner DeLucia. We have already exceeded that number, and that was why we are doing this master plan update actually earlier than we would have normally anticipated. The last master plan, the date of it was a 2017 master plan, and you would hope to go at least 5 or 10 years before that, and we're definitely at the shorter end of that. So there's been a lot of changes that have happened in the industry for various different reasons. Some of it has to do with pilot shortages and staffing that was ongoing, and then ultimately when COVID hit, Santa Barbara being being a destination that you can do outdoor activities was one of the locations that Southwest decided to add, and that changed a lot of our dynamic with the competition with all of the other carriers. But then the staffing issue with pilots in the regional airlines resulted in a shift from those regional aircraft that were traditionally along the 50 to 70 seat aircraft into what we call mainline aircraft with the Airbus and the Boeing 737s with 150 seats or more. And so we do have quite a few less aircraft flying in to handle all of those passengers, but they are larger aircraft, and it does have an impact not just on the operations around the airport, also on our terminal facilities, which were designed for those regional aircraft.
I have two more questions. One has to do with the terminal improvement project. Is that a result of the increase in the employments?
So the Terminal Improvement Project is a project that was identified in the 2017 master plan, and it just happened to be pushed up in priority due to the added employments that we've seen at the airport.
Okay, and that's an expanded terminal, correct?
Correct. It adds two jet bridge gates onto the existing terminal.
Okay. And then one final question about the capital dollars that come in to fund the capital projects. It says 50% will be private funding. So how do you calculate the private funding? Is it because of the hangars where that people will be investing in?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner DeLucia. There's a couple of different projects that we have in the master plan. One is the FBO redevelopment. We are very close to issuing a request for proposals to see who our long-term partners will be at the airport for our fixed base operators. They're the companies that handle all of the transient aircraft that come into the area for fueling and other services. Currently, that is Signature Aviation and Atlantic. They both do a fine job, but as we enter into a long-term lease for those facilities, we have to go through a process to make sure that it's fair and everybody has an opportunity to apply for that. So we anticipate that there will be millions of dollars invested into those facilities for those transient services that come in. In addition to that, we have storage hangars in the master plan for some of the much smaller general aviation to kind of mid-size aircraft. And those we have the opportunity to look at it in different ways. One of those would be that we could build those facilities as the city and rent them out. But as we are focused on many other large projects that are high dollar items, the alternative to that would be to do long-term land leases and allow for private investment to come into the airport. And that is a very highly likely scenario for our airport.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you for the work you've been doing. I think it's progressing quite nicely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Barnwell, or DeLucia. Commissioner Barnwell next, followed by Wiscombe, then Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The information that you showed us about noise level didn't include any decibel counts. So I'm presuming there's some general decibel count associated with low, medium, and high. Maybe there isn't. But to go back to the comment made by the woman who is in the neighborhood affected by the noise, Traditionally, we operate here on the basis of data. And I remember when the county bowl was being hit pretty hard by the neighbors because of the noise coming from the county bowl, and it's a county piece of real estate. The county put up monitoring devices, and then it was available to the community whenever they wanted to go to see what the maximum volume was on Saturday night from whatever band was there. So there was a running record of these things, and it didn't take a scientific expert. You could just see what it was, and you could see the diminishment. It gradually ended up being controlled by the hours of operation of the bowl. And I think also of things like a weather report where you can find out what it is today, what it was yesterday. I don't know if it can be done, but it seems as though because the noise is so important, you emphasized it, we have a lady who's emphasized it, it may be something that we might want to fine tune. How can we put up some 24/7 monitoring devices and we can just find out what it is? Because when you come back with this information, I would actually like to see what those numbers were, rather than say, well, we're kind of low or we're kind of high. Because we get more pushback on that noise thing than almost anything else that the airport does, and I know you know that. And I'm sorry if I turned this into comment, I didn't mean to, but that would be a nice thing that we could do that. I wanted to ask, the money part, you described it for the facilities that you're putting up. Does that money also fund the airport building when you redo that? Because you're going to talk about that rehab as well. This money isn't that money, is that right?
So the relocation of our admin building is not included specifically in the project, but it's related to our FBO redevelopment. So as we look at those proposals that come in, one of the thoughts behind that is that could potentially help to fund the relocation of our building through that private development of those two facilities.
And that doesn't include any rehab of the main terminal building, where you might want to do something to that. That isn't part of it, correct?
That is not part of it. So we currently have the terminal improvement project that is moving forward. We've given an update to this commission in the past, and as Ms. Metzger mentioned, it will be coming forward for the environmental review shortly. So that is a totally separate project. Some of the funds that were mentioned will assist in paying for that, including the passenger facility charge and potentially some grant funding that we have just recently applied for as well.
And I presume that plan will, because of the way it interfaces on Fairview, there will be road improvements associated with getting in and out of the new admin building.
So in this master plan, there are some actual terminal roadside improvements that was listed on that list of improvements in dollar amounts. It's not significant changes, though.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And if I might add, just for clarification, the numbers that were on the screen for the noise, that actually is a decibel measurement, that 60 and the 65. Mr. Smith could explain it a little bit better, but it's a cumulative number, so it's not like a peak number of 90 decibels flying over, if you want to add a little bit to that.
If I may add, none of us know what 60 decibels means. I mean, what's it like on a city street, or what's it like at a rock concert? Those numbers have no context for us.
You're exactly right. It is in a metric that's run through a computer simulator that assigns those penalties for nighttime and evening operations. It's an annualized average. It is not what a person hears, but it is what the FAA uses for evaluating whether or not land uses are compatible with the 65 contour. The idea of exploring a monitoring system is a valid one that would give the public a different perception of what noise is.
And I wanted to thank you for that comment, because we actually do have 3 noise monitors that we just took great effort to make sure that they're certified and accurate. And so part of the noise working group is looking at whether we need additional and other things like that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, can I make a clarifying point, please?
Sure.
I meant to say that the terminal improvement project will come back to you for the coastal development permit, and the master plan will come back to you for CEQA.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Commissioner Wiscombe, followed by Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it. Can we put up the slide on the noise levels again? want to look at it. I'm not sure I have any more questions on it. I like the fact that, so what I'm understanding from that deals with the noise levels for the master plan and master plan update, right? In the years that it's done, so it doesn't.
That is correct.
Yeah, okay. So it doesn't, it's not ongoing so your working group for noise is to address ongoing issues?
So
Yeah.
if you look at the noise contour, the blue 2021 is the baseline number. So that is established with what the noise should look like right now. It may have changed a little bit since 2021, but that is the baseline for where we're at right now. And I just want to clarify again, these are numbers that show that the noise contours are getting closer to the airport, but that is a cumulative metric, and it does not factor into perception. We're not here to try to say that things are getting better and the noise problem has gone away. There is still early morning flights. There is still a perception when an airplane flies over your house and does make noise. We understand that still exists.
Okay, and the diagram here includes the penalties for the various hours, the 10 decibels and the 5 decibels.
That is correct.
Yeah, okay. And then you said you have 3 noise monitors that you have calibrated, for lack of a better word, to make sure that they're calibrated properly. Where are they located?
So I apologize that the third one always confuses me with exactly where it is, but the main 2 that we look at are over towards the Costco shopping center on the approach to runway 7, and then over towards the Mesa area for the approach to runway 25.
Okay. So are you planning on adding more noise monitors to address a wider, I don't know how much area these noise monitors cover, so is it adequate or do you need more?
So that is one of the discussion items that we'll be talking about on the noise working group. You can add other areas, so if we wanted to see potentially how much noise the smaller aircraft are using for our crosswind runways, that could potentially be helpful. But we are adequately capturing the departures and the arrivals for the main runway right now with the 2 that exist. So we're not opposed to looking at if there's the need for more, and that would be something that the noise working group looks at. In addition, if we conducted a noise study, there would obviously be a more thorough look at the existing noise conditions as well.
Right, okay. Okay, thank you for that. That's great. And then I had a question on just the last page of the report. I was intrigued by the master plan update will incorporate updated forthcoming sea level rise data into the alternatives and will examine aircraft electrification and sustainable aviation fuels. First of all, what are sustainable aviation fuels? I would love to know what that is.
So there's been a lot of work to go into sustainable aviation fuels, and it doesn't have so much to do with the emissions coming out of the aircraft. It has to do with producing those fuels, what goes into them, and the transportation methods of getting those fuels to the airport, but does have a lot lesser of an impact to the environment on a global scale as airports shift over to those sustainable aviation fuels. I don't know if, Corbett, you have more information on what goes into.
Essentially, think of non-petroleum-based fuels. There's some that are derived from algae. There's some that have been, corn and plant-based, a variety, but not petroleum sourced.
Okay, and there's a lot of work being done on those, but they're not being used yet on commercial aircraft, are they?
Absolutely being used currently. The problem is that it's not commercially available to all airports. The supply is not quite there yet.
So that's where you have these in your master plan, these whatever.
Fuel farm.
Fuel farms, yeah.
Fuel farm is just another word for storage tanks.
Right.
And so as we switch to new fuels at the airport, whether that be sustainable aviation fuel or unleaded fuels for the smaller avgas-powered aircraft, we can't just intermingle those fuels in the same tank. So hopefully we would transition exclusively to those fuels in the future, but at some point we're going to have both fuels available as we make that transition, and you can't do that in just the current infrastructure that we have.
Okay, and then what about aircraft electrification? Where is that in the process? I'm curious.
So that there's still a lot of work to be done there. If you just search eVTOL aircraft, it's the vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. They look similar to like a drone that you would be familiar with. 4 to 8 passenger aircraft currently are being developed, but ultimately it could go into many different other kinds of aircraft as well. There are several different manufacturers undergoing flight testing currently and certification, and one of them has actually already announced some of their route maps. It does not include Santa Barbara. It's more focused on the Los Angeles area and getting to some of the stadiums and other areas that are hard to get to with traffic. There's airlines that have already partnered up with these companies to try to get people from remote areas to the airport without having to use the roads. And then there's also cargo operators that have contracted with these companies to start working on some of the shorter haul deliveries. At this point, it's the industry is still too early for us to fully understand how that will impact Santa Barbara, but that is the direction that the industry is going in right now. So we want to make sure that we reserve some space for them and then ultimately look at some of the electrification requirements for the airport as well.
So you've reserved some space for electric charging EV stations at the airport when the time comes?
So if you look at in the master plan document, it details it a little bit better. It's very similar to a heliport because they are vertical takeoff and landing, and so most of the evaluation had to do with how does it impact the fixed wing airplanes coming in and out of the aircraft for their traffic pattern to make sure that as we integrate those types of airplanes, we're not interfering with the normal traffic pattern for the airport.
I see. Okay, thank you. Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks again for the presentation. I really appreciate it. That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too am concerned about the noise issue, and I know how difficult it must be when you've lived so long in the one place and it keeps getting worse and worse. You mentioned some of the aircraft are quieter. What efforts do you know of that are being made by the aircraft manufacturers in producing quieter aircraft, and does the airport have any say in whether you can ask for quieter aircraft to be used here?
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. It's good to see you again. The aircraft that fly in and out of the airport are all regulated by the FAA, and over time, they have come up with different noise restrictions to phase out older, more loud aircraft. There's also a benefit to the airlines and the aircraft manufacturers. Those quieter aircraft are usually quieter because they're more efficient, fuel efficient. They also want to keep the interior cabin space quieter for their passengers. So in general, it's just the natural transition as technology becomes available that aid in reducing the footprint of the noise for those aircraft. But I will say the most major change that we are seeing will be the electrification efforts, because you will then have a total different propulsion system. It will still have some noise element to that. It has propellers or rotors or whatever those types of aircraft have. But the current ones that are being flight tested right now are much quieter than similar aircraft or helicopters that are currently in use. So as we switch more to electrification, I think that will be the biggest impact that you will see.
Well, that's encouraging. I hope it goes rapidly and well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I have a couple questions. Ms. Messer, could you put up the parking slide? And these questions come as a user of the airport, and noticing sometimes, parking has become an issue, both on the long-term and short-term. You go to the short-term and find there's no space. You loop around, you go to long-term, there's no space, and all the anxiety that does come about with that. My questions are more about the conversation and where we are in the process about the structured parking and its location and its size. in this process? Has the plan made a decision that this structured parking is going to be in that location, or where are we in that process?
Start on that and then I can follow up.
Yes, so there was a number of alternatives looked at for the location of a parking garage. Those are the 4 on the screen. For various reasons, Site 5 was chosen as the preferred alternative, which is near, just south of the existing terminal. The first and foremost reason is that's the site that could accommodate the entirety of the demand of projected parking throughout the 20-year period. So that is reserved to be shown on the airport layout plan as the future parking garage location.
And this is basically south of the existing terminal. I'm just trying to understand.
And just to add that to that, I appreciate your comments. As a passenger, oftentimes of the airport, I have the same frustration going into our parking lots, and that comes with the additional passengers that we serve. But we do have a few projects prior to this parking garage that are going to aid in dealing with that situation. One of them, and these are projects from the 2017 master plan that are currently underway. So we just finished up our Southfield Phase 1 project, which added some rental car spaces. So that is opened back up. So if you've heard any complaints about the length of travel to get to the rental cars, that is now back to normal. Phase 2 is under design right now, so that will add a few hundred surface parking spaces to the south of there. Hopefully, at least significantly reduce, if not eliminate, our reliance on a shuttle to the economy lot, other than maybe peak times during holidays, and hopefully aid in that, getting rid of that frustration, because I know we have a lot of passengers that we hear that from. Additionally, we have some new parking improvements that have already gone in that we're working with our IT department right now to be able to put up on our website, so that rather than just waiting to see the orange sign as you drive down Fairview, which hopefully will go away at some point, you will be able to see how many spaces are available in each of the lots to better plan your trip as you come into the airport.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Hester. And I'd like to, commend you and your group for your transparency and openness in the process. I mean, you've done a very good job. I think my fellow commissioners have made comments to that in the past as you've gone through this process, and it was very nice that we all had an opportunity to tour the site. I learned things from that process in which I would never have ever even thought of some of those questions that you brought to us at the time. I do know that if airports, the feds have taken much more control of the airport operations than we used to have. I mean, local governments used to be able to control a lot of the inputs and outputs of an airport. They do not have that ability. Thank you, Congress, for that. So, I think your transparency as to what flexibility you do have is very important, because unfortunately, a lot of that flexibility did go away. So,
Thank you for the comment, Chair Balke. I will add that aircraft noise is not unique to Santa Barbara. And so as these issues continue to arise at other airports, especially with earlier morning departures, things like that, the FAA is actually taking a bigger look at the noise issue again and identifying community stakeholder liaisons. And so it's unfortunate that the timing, they're not quite there yet, but I do think that the FAA is going to be addressing this issue a little bit better as well.
okay, thank you. Do we have a motion, or do we just receive and file this report? And Commissioner Marnell has a question, but
Did we pass right through comments? Because I had a couple.
no, we can go to that. I was just saying a question, sort of what our
Oh, I'm
next step
sorry.
was, and
Is it-
then we'll go to that. Is there an action item on this, or other than receive and file? I mean, just-
Chair Balke, there's no action for your commission today, just receive the update.
Okay, so we're going to move to comments, and Mr. Barnwell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Balke talked about there's so much going on at an airport that we don't even know about. I got a tour of the old airport before this new one was built, and they were whining and complaining they needed a new building, and everybody's going, yeah, you don't need a new building. And we took a tour, and they had extension cords laid out all over the floor to hook up their computers and their lights, and I went, oh my God, you guys need a new building. But you don't see that from the outside, but there's an awful lot of stuff that goes on in this. Now, I want to, number one, I want to thank you for your discussion of the inside the boundary lines of the airport. I would like to talk about the outside of the boundary lines of the airport as they are covered in this specific plan, if I may. So, Ms. Johnson, could you put, I had my, my Scandinavian architect draw up some fabulous things here so that you could get an idea of what I'm talking about. So, does my little thing here show? Yeah. See where I've got motel right there? I'm sure you guys know about that, right? Okay. That motel right now is some form of transitional housing for affordable housing. Ms. Johnson, could you go to the next page? Okay, so could you put the two, see the two in the lower right-hand corner? You put that in the upper right-hand corner so that there you go, thank you. Okay, this is laid out like it is on the ground. And the yellow arrow points to the motel, and the red line is the line of the property of the airport. And you'll notice that the parking for the motel is on our property. All of it. If you would put the next piece of paper up. Now, this is a crummy little thing that I did from the actual survey document of the airport. But these are the two, this is essentially the hotel right here that I've got the arrows to. And our property line comes right up to within a very few feet of the wall of that airport. The next one, Ms. Johnson, please. This is standing on Fairview looking at that motel. This red line represents where our airport property is, and no cars in the motel are parking on motel property on that side of the building. And then these other cars are associated with airport use. I'm not exactly sure how. The reason that I'm bringing this up is twofold, threefold. In the early days, we never thought of housing as being anywhere compatible with airports, right? I mean, you just don't do housing compatible with airports. But as I read this document in detail, the 2017, which is the big document, it mentions, and I think this is, you guys did a good job, like I said, inside the property lines, but I'm now talking about like South Coast wide. It says specifically that the airport shall comply with or contribute to citywide programs of affordable housing. So I plant that seed right now because I've never heard it done before, but I think it's something we want to think about. And I noticed that this particular location indeed has housing. And I don't know, adjacent to that, going south on this side of the red line, I don't know how that would work. But I would like you guys to think about those things when you're talking about your buildings, et cetera. And it may not even be something that the airport needs to worry about. You just do some kind of a land lease with someone else and they handle the whole thing. It's not part of, excuse me.
Are you asking to look into actually building housing on airport property?
The city of Santa Barbara right now is going through a process of what does the sentence mean, build housing? Does it mean I put on a carpenter's belt or the other guy does? Or do we lease it? Or do we become equity partners? It's a wide array. But that question needs to be asked because I don't think the city of Santa Barbara, I'll go big on this. The state of California, the United States, the nation itself has an issue more pressing than housing. Would you go to the next one, please? And turn it long way there. This one is incredible to me. Speaking of, there's the Marriott right there. This, where I've drawn that wonderful yellow arrow, this area right here is a subdivision. It's townhouses and apartments, et cetera. And it's right there where we never traditionally used to think that there would be housing. So again, and also notice, it's a busy commercial boulevard along here. Another component of this general plan, or this plan is, which I want to say out loud so it doesn't get lost, in the 2017 master plan, A major goal of the city is to maximize revenues collected by the airport department for the lease and rent of all of its properties. The next piece of paper, please. This goes to this conversations with the city of Goleta. It's kind of hard to see, but right over here is what is referred to as the extension of Equal, right? You might have talked about it with Goleta, I don't know. And you may be familiar with the fact that we got our knuckles wrapped years ago when we started to expand the airport, and Goleta said, you can't let Fairview Hollister stay the way it is. You got to help us beef it up, which we did. But it's interesting that the intersection of that Equal, and maybe that's why you chose to put your new admin building there, but your admin building is going to be almost directly across the street from where the Equal Boulevard will hit. And for people who don't know the Equal Boulevard, along Ward Memorial, the big main way into the university, there's a street on the Santa Barbara City side of that freeway called Equal, and in the future plans of the city of Goleta, they want to extend that through this section of Old Town Goleta to create relief for Hollister Avenue's traffic. That also is something that I want to be sure we plant the seed in. I guess maybe Goleta got a hold of you and talked to you about that. But it goes to the issue that Chair Balke brought up about parking. Whenever you talk about where you're going to park a car, you have to think about how did you get that car there. And there may be nothing you can do about it, but we should think about it. The deliciously funky freeway off-ramp off of Ward Memorial that leads to the airport. I mean, I feel like I've gone back in time 100 years. You make those slow little turns and you come around. And this brings me again to more parking issues not addressed in this plan, which is for bicycles. One might say, well, you're not going to go to the airport and ride a bicycle. Well, you won't, because there's no place to put your bicycle. But about 2 blocks away from us right here in what we call the Granada Garage, there's an inside parking space for bicycles, and you hang the upper wheel on it, and we could rent that out and it could be another income stream. And people could put their bicycle on the front of a bus and come to the airport, take it off the front of the bus and put it in some kind of bicycle parking. And if you look at the way State Street is functioning right now, there's bicycles all over the place, and I don't see that diminishing. So I think another thought process as you tackle parking would be, how are we going to do the bicycles? And Ms. Johnson, by the way, I want to thank you very much. Now, this goes to the overview of all of my comments. This is to scale. That black line right there represents the entirety of La Cumbre Plaza. And this white is a repeat of that, and that represents the entirety of La Cumbre Plaza. Now, admittedly, where I've placed those, they're encroaching onto the runways, et cetera, but it gives you a thumbnail sketch of how much land there is out there, and whether or not we are utilizing it for our housing the way we could if we thought like that, because we haven't been thinking like that. So I would strongly encourage us to begin that dialogue of, is there anywhere we can put this housing? And if we did, how would it be framed? Ms. Johnson, I think maybe there's one more in 6. Oh yeah, and this is your priority thing, right? This was in your document, the
Previous
priorities of
master
things.
plan.
And I think you discussed when the administration building would be moved. Great idea. I mean, the sooner you can do that thing, the better, which frees up land that's over in that other spot where you could use it for other things. Is there another one on there, Ms. Johnson? And then this goes to the bicycles. Okay, thank you, Ms. Johnson. The reason that I've gone to this depth, and because it's so near and dear to my heart, is because I helped draft the first 1998 document that the 2017 document was an extension of. And when Mr. Balke talked, Chair Balke talks about knowing it, we walked the corners. We looked at the fuel depot site. We looked at everything. And in those days, we didn't think like we're thinking now. But I would offer the suggestion to you that we begin to put on our our capital P planning hat, because planning is the future, planning's not the past. And you guys are the stewards of a very large piece of ground that's right sitting in the living room couch of Goleta. And I know they resent it sometimes, but any partnership we can do with them as well, particularly if they're going to bring Equil across, and the improvement of the traffic patterns on Fairview. And then let's look at that motel. I mean, I don't know if you know, are we getting rent from the motel on them parking their cars on our land?
If they're using part of our land, then yes, they do have a lease with us or some type of agreement.
Okay, good. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also want to say I'm again, very, very, very impressed. I know your total document has many, many components to it, and we're just looking at airplanes right now. But this is to suggest that in the future, when we look at the rest of your document, we maybe talk about some of these things. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for your work.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to jump the line because I have sort of a follow-up set of questions, honestly, that fall right out of what he just brought up and definitely inform us of where we're at in the process. The county has an airport land use compatibility planning process, which needs to be updated every, 20 years or so. Where is that? Because that deals with the land uses around airports. Where are we in that process? Has it been updated? And could you sort of bring forward that? Because what he's talking about is very much, will be controlled by that document.
So thank you, Chair Balke. So currently, the FAA does not allow us to have any residential on airport actual property. That could change in the future. That's something that we could look at. We do have a lot of property that could potentially be outside of some of the safety areas that you mentioned in the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. So the SBCAG is who oversees the Airport Land Use Plan and the Commission. And that document was recently updated. I apologize, I don't have it at the top of my head, but it was approved since I've been here, so within the last year and a half or 2 years. So there has been an update to that document, and they have updated the safety zones around the airport. And so as you look at some of the recommendations that you mentioned, you do have some hotels fairly close. There are allowances to build residential around the airports, but it is limited by that document with occupancy and other restrictions
population
potentially,
density
depending on where it is in relation to the airport and our approaches to the airport.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Boss.
Thank you, Chair. I was trying to look up, I know there is a formal agreement between the County Housing Authority and the city. It may not specifically be the airport for parking, and there was during construction, and it's permanent housing, so better than transitional. Yes, yes. And I wanted, I guess, a follow-up question or comment from, I think you came in March was maybe the last time. And at that time, we talked about housing for employees as airport operations expand. And I know in the housing element update, there is a goal that's related to a commercial linkage fee. So has that been part of this process, or has there been consultation between the two?
So I know we do have regular conversations with the city of Goleta and looking at different housing projects around the airport. I don't know of anything specific yet that has been looked at specific to airport and employee housing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have no further lights on unless somebody, okay. So with that, thank you for your report. We don't have any action, but we will see you again at some point in time in the process. And thank you all for your efforts and for your presentation. I think it was very informative. All right, with that, we're going to move on to our next part of our agenda, which is the administrative agenda. And we start off with committee and liaison reports. And the first on that is Staff Hearing Officer, Commissioner Boss. Do you have a report this time?
No report this time, but I will next time.
Okay. Other committees and liaison reports. We have a number of other folks. We have Sheila, Commissioner Lodge. You can report first, followed by Commissioner DeLucia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yesterday, the Historic Landmarks Commission had 3 sets of plans for pre-approved accessory dwelling unit plans that people will be able to, once they're approved, they can go and look at these and pick the one they like, and then they go directly to that architect and work with the architect, but then that's it, it's all set. And therefore, there are various styles, as we've discussed, related to the odds, but so that's another way of making the process go faster.
Okay, thank you. And I had that on my report also, but you covered it so well, I don't need to go there. Thank you. But I'm going to also, you may remember this one, it's going to come before us. It was for a conceptual review. It's 428 Trapala Street. And there was a restaurant there for many years called Casa de Sevilla Restaurant? Sevilla Restaurant. I think it's before my time. I don't remember it. But they're going to demolish all existing on-site improvements, except there's a historic sandstone wall there. So they're going to incorporate that into a new building and construct 33-unit, 3-story residential apartment complex. And it's going to be under the AUD program and state density bonus program. They won't have any vehicle park. They don't have to, and they're not proposing any vehicle parking due to AB 2097. 2097 is there within a half a mile of a major transit. The HLC was overall they're really pleased with the design right out, and it's going to have a courtyard design actually, which is compatible to the building across the street. And they were okay with the size, bulk, and the scale of the project, and so it will be coming for us. I don't know when, but I would think in the near future. Thank you.
Commissioner Barnwell.
A question of Ms. Lodge, are those ADU plans proprietary to the architect, or are they going to be for the general public? Do you have to go to that specific architect to use those ADA plans? So they're proprietary, meaning?
You have to go through the architect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And Mr. DeLuccio, you may want to know that the basement of the Casa de Sevilla was one of the 3 downtown speakeasies during the Depression. And I'm sure a historical discussion of that building will bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to bring up, as some of you know, I've been involved over the years with the commercial fishermen of Santa Barbara, and they have and I don't have the details here, there's some confusion about where it's being held, but I know they're having a panel discussion on September 4th, and I believe it's from 4 to 7 p.m. The invitation I got was at City College, but it's been announced on KEYT and other stations as being over at the Resource Center at Hendry's Beach. So I'll have to check on that. If anyone's interested in more details on that, just give me a jingle or a text, and I'll get you the information. But I think Peter Rupert's speaking. Kristen Miller from the Chambers on the panel also, from what I'm being told. And it should be interesting to learn more about the blue economy and ways that we can improve it here in Santa Barbara. Thank you.
Okay, with seeing no more lights on, I will adjourn the meeting at 3:11 p.m. This concludes the August 29th Planning Commission hearing, and our next meeting will be tentatively set for September 12th at 1 o'clock. So thank you all.